Welcome to the February 17th, 2022 Metropolitan Area Planning Commission meeting. Let's have our public announcements, please.
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. For those in attendance, copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and planning department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representatives to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please share your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the room. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. All speakers at the podium, please remove your face mask before speaking into the microphone. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking, but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please provide your contact information to the Planning Department. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on all the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as courteous and concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available from the planning staff. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to the district court.
Thank you. Our first item is roll call.
Yes, sir. Bill Johnson?
Present.
Fox?
Present.
John McKay is absent. Green? Jewell?
Here.
Blick? Mr. Blick? Mr. Blick, are you there? Mark him as absent. Nix is absent. Foster?
Here.
Warren?
Here.
Joe Johnson?
Here.
Miles?
Present.
Hartman is absent. Florence?
Here.
Cunningham?
Here.
I show 10 members present, sir.
First item, we're going to approve the MAPC meeting minutes of February 3rd. I have a motion from the commission.
Move to approve the
I
minutes.
move. Second.
Motion approved by Ms. Foster, second by Joe Johnson. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? 10-0. Was everybody present at that
I have
meeting?
I have to abstain. I would have to abstain. I was missing.
Mr. Florence, I have to abstain.
Hartman, yeah.
901. Okay, the only subdivision item 2022-000003 has been deferred till the March 3rd meeting. And we don't have to take a vote on it, do we?
No, sir, since it was the applicant that requested the deferral. It
Okay.
happens automatically.
I think we'll leave the planning commission meeting, go to BZA since we got one case on that.
Yes, sir. First item on the BZA agenda is the minutes.
Okay, the first item, we need to approve the minutes of the January 20th, 2022 BZA meeting.
I move we approve the minutes.
Moved by Ms. Fox,
Second.
second by Ms. Foster. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Abstain.
Warren was not here. Okay, the first case, BZA 2021-73, which we deferred this case to get additional information.
Kathy Morgan for the Planning Department. Mr. Chair, would you like me to briefly review the case in its entirety and then go to the changes that were requested?
Yeah, very brief, because
Okay, so this is a request for a variance for a building setback at the northwest corner of Section Line Road, 101st Street north of Valley Center, and Meridian Avenue North. And the original staff recommendation found that the applicant did not meet the 5 criteria for approving or allowing the variance. In discussion from the commission members, it was requested of the applicant that they bring back a new site plan for consideration so that it may be less impact on the road right-of-way. So, Ty Ben, could you move to the 2 site plan options? Okay, there's the first one. This is what the applicant had originally requested, which would move that building further into the setback for Meridian Street. And you can see there the existing driveways. This one comes out to 101st, and then the one that comes off Meridian. Next, please. And here's just the site plan without the aerial under it, so you can see that they would be requesting 20 feet into the setback. Next one. This is the option that was discussed by the commission members to relocate the building down to the southeast corner. And this is what they came up with off of 101st Street. It would be a 10-foot from 15 foot from 85 to 70 feet. And then they would request a 5-foot encroachment into the 85-foot setback off Meridian. And let me go to the next one, Ty Ben. And there you can see it. You see that it's inside the tree line, It doesn't impinge on the driveway. Staff had quite a bit of discussion about this. It still does not meet the 5 criteria that is required for granting a variance, and those 5 criteria are the uniqueness. This is really not a unique situation. The reason he can't put it behind the house is because of the lateral field. The adjacent, the one comment that staff did have is that this is not an uncommon request for the county, but strictly speaking, according to the legal requirements, this does not meet the level for uniqueness. And then the hardship. Hardship, again, is defined by what the state statute says, and this does not come to that level of meeting a hardship. The public interest, the staff recommended that it did not, the location did not affect the neighbors. However, you have to consider in the public interest is what the guidelines say about safety, and then there again, so we're into the building setback of the 2 section line roads. And the spirit and intent, the spirit of the UZC is to protect the adjoining property owners from adverse impacts that would negatively affect their properties. So staff evaluation finds that when considering all 5 of these criteria, or the other 4 criteria, that the variance request does not meet the spirit and intent of the UZC.
Any questions from the commission?
So it appears as though option 2 would not interfere, or if it did, would have minimal interference if, in fact, the county were to put in a full-blown intersection there with, dedicated right turn lanes, center turn lanes. The property is encroaching minimally into the proposed, imposing into the setback, the building setbacks.
Right.
I'm just, and also it appears as though there really isn't any other place that would have this minimal amount of effect on the property. It's about the only place that they can put it without really going into, building setbacks. So I'm kind of hard pressed to find anything terribly wrong with this, but that's just kind of my opinion. I don't know if you can elaborate any more on.
What the recommendations were, if the Board of Zoning Appeals would decide that evaluating of the 5 criteria is not, it certainly could be interpreted more broadly, then the recommendation would be to include the following conditions: that the setback reduction only apply to where the building is on the site, which would be 5 feet into the meridian building setback and 15 feet into the West 101st Street North setback. They supply a surveyed scaled site plan, and that they obtain the proper building permits and inspections.
Any other questions? How about the commissioners at virtual? Any questions? Seeing none, applicant or agent, please.
Good afternoon, Chase Klickner. I live at 10203 North Meridian Avenue, and that's in Valley Center. After the last meeting that we had, after you guys had recommended that moving this building to the southeast corner, I went back to there and did some measurements, and it actually seems that this is actually a better location as far as not being too far into any of the right-of-ways or the setbacks. I personally don't think it's going to affect them when they decide to widen the roads. So that's about all I've got.
Any questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Is there anybody else here in the commission chambers wishing to speak on this item? Is there anybody virtual want to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to commission. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we grant the vacation as requested, keeping in mind that it's only that this vacation only involves the 5 feet of area on Meridian and the 15 feet on 101st Street to minimize the amount of encroachment into those setbacks.
Should be option 2.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. Approving option 2. Thank you for that clarification.
Ms. Foster?
I spent some time yesterday parsing statute 12-759. And as I understand it, even if we solve the setback problems, and I said this at the last meeting, we still have to have all 5 conditions met, and there are still 2 that are not met by the statute's definition. If we would decide to approve this, we have to come up with alternative findings, as I understand it from what staff has come up with, to explain how we think this condition, this situation, meets all 5 conditions, and I just don't see how legally we can do that. For instance, the uniqueness. It's generally used when a property is an odd shape, or there's steep slopes, or there's a stream running through the middle or something that makes it impossible for the landowner to use his land as it's intended to be used within his zoning, and therefore they need a variance. But this land is RR, rural residential. It's being used as rural residential. There's nothing particularly unique about it under the terminology of the statute. I don't see how we can fairly make an alternative finding that the uniqueness requirement is met. And then the hardship one, I sympathize with the landowner, and I understand that from your perspective it's hardship, but under the statute, it's not as I read it, at least, and clearly not as staff has read it. So before we vote on this, I think we need to discuss the other 2 conditions besides the setback ones. And if you all can come up with alternative findings that seem to meet the requirements of the statute, then I'm fine. I do think this is the most logical place on the site to put the building, but I don't think we're meeting the requirements of Kansas law here if we vote to approve this. With the response for the uniqueness, I don't see anywhere else on this property where the building location could fit. They're saving the trees, which is one of the concerns. They can't put it on the back side of their property because there's a large lateral field. So for them to be able to have any kind of structure at all, it is
going to need to be generally in one of these two areas. And seeing that it's a minimal infringement on the proposed building locations to the right-of-way, not right-of-way, excuse me, the building setbacks, I think that is in and of itself enough to declare that this is a hardship for them in order to be able to do something with their property that they would like to do.
Got a motion, do I have a second?
For discussion purposes, I'll second.
Mr. Warren will second it. I, for one, am glad we deferred this and had them come up with a site plan, because I think option 2 is a whole lot better than option would have been 1. And I don't know that I was opposed to option 1. I think we'll have to stress this so we get all 5 of the items covered, but I want to get on my soapbox a little bit. If everything that come in front of us was black and white and met everything that's required, we wouldn't need to have a commission. But with that said, I want to hear some more discussion.
We go back to
I have a question.
the drawing that shows the trees.
Ms. Cunningham?
Yes, this new location, was that suggested by staff and he's going along with it? Is that what I understand? So I assume that legal was consulted before we got this far?
The process was, Ms. Cunningham, was that one of the commission members requested at the February 3rd meeting for a new drawing, number 1, more specific drawings, survey drawings that were certainly better prepared so that you could really see instead of just an estimate. That was requested by the commission, and then the applicant agreed to do that and bring it back to this meeting for consideration. This report was reviewed by the staff review, the review committee, and so the county counselor, assistant county counselor, was part of that review.
Okay.
Mr. Florence, do you have some comment?
No. No.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at this thing, trying to figure out what the uniqueness and the aspect of looking at this from the aerial standpoint, and the trees and the foliage in the area, that covers both uniqueness and hardship. I mean, reading what we've got down here in Kansas law says that moving, putting something there would create some kind of a hardship. Well, it would be a hardship to remove those trees. I mean, that's something that we want to keep. That's something as a community we want to see continue. And so, the one place that it could be moved would be the one place that would be a big hardship and take away some of the uniqueness. So, I think that would cover both, in my opinion.
Any other discussion? I think we'll do a roll call on this one, please.
Yes, sir.
And the motion is to approve the applicant with the option 2 site plan.
That included staff.
And
Option 2 with the condition specified by staff that it would only be approved to the location of the building. Also with the additional findings or alternative findings that the hardship and is met and uniqueness are met, both due to the presence of the trees and the detrimental impacts that would have to the community, as well as that the site, that there's no additional or alternative location on the site to place the structure. Bill Johnson.
Yes.
Fox.
Yes.
McKay is absent. Green.
Aye.
Dool.
Yes.
Blick is absent. Nix is absent. Foster.
No.
Warren.
Aye.
Joe Johnson. Mr. Joe Johnson.
Yes.
Miles.
Aye.
Hartman is absent. Florence.
No.
Cunningham.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Vote is 8-2. Motion passes.
That's all that we have got on the BZA, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to go back to planning commission meeting. First item, vacation item 2021-00054. Is there anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Any of the commissioners that are versatile, do you want to hear this case? Is there anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this case? Anybody versatile want to hear this case? Anybody versatile? Hearing none, we'll take that.
Move to approve agenda item 3.1.
Motion by Mr. Warren.
Second.
Second by Mr. Green. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, the next item, we're going to go to conditional use 2021-00065. Since this was deferred and it's been to the DAB and staff has got a little different report on it, I think we need to hear this case. Ms. Scott.
Yes.
Sir, one question on this is we are not sure whether or not the applicant or agent is online. So I'm wondering if I could, I'd like to request and see if they are participating in the meeting.
We can just go on to the rest of the agenda and hold that one?
Yes, sir, we can certainly do that if you like.
All right, we're going to put that item on hold, so we're going to go to item 4.2. Additional 2022-00001. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Any of the commissioners of virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the chamber here want to hear that? We'll hear that case. I didn't hear that.
He wants the next one too.
All right.
4.2 and
I
4.4.
don't even have to ask nobody then. Let's go to 4.4. CUP 2022-00001. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Any of the commissioners in the virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this case? How about anybody virtual? We can take that on consent. 4.5 has been deferred to 3/3 of 22. So we'll go on to 4.6. Zoning case 2022-00001. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? How about the members that are on virtual want to hear this case?
Stan Davis.
The first of
Sir, I believe that was someone joining by phone, and so the system announced their name.
So we'll need to hear 4.6?
You may want to check and see if there's anyone who wants to hear that.
Whoever's on the phone, what item are you looking at?
Okay, this is Stanley Davis.
Oh, okay. He's number 1.
That is the property owner for case 4.1, sir.
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back to that item. 4.6, is there anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? Zoning case 2022-00001. We take that on consent. 4.7, 2022-00002. This was approved by DAB. Does anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Does anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? Hearing none, we'll take that on consent.
Stanley.
I'm sorry?
Sir, that appears to be Mr. Davis. I believe that we're hearing an additional conversation that he's having on the other end of his phone.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve items 4.4, 4.6, and 4.7.
Second.
Motion to approve 4.4, 4.6, and 4.7 by Mr. Green, second by Ms. Foster. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we're going to come back to item 4.1, 2021-00065.
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Matt Williams for the Planning Department. Con 2021-65 is a request for a conditional use to allow a nightclub in the city at 3906 East 13th Street. So as a reminder, this was heard at your January 20th Planning Commission meeting where it was deferred until today. The purpose of that deferral was to give the applicant some time to clearly define what they were seeking with this application and for the case to be reheard at DAB 1. Following that meeting, I spoke with the applicant and he reiterated that he does not have specific plans for the building. He would like the ability to lease out the space and or operate the space himself. The applicant would also like the ability for the space to be operated as a bar with entertainment and or an event center with alcohol. Both of those uses would be classified as a nightclub in the city and would require this conditional use. Following these discussions and hearing from the Planning Commission, we updated our staff report with 2 additional conditions of approval. Number 1 involves a fence on the west side of the property. If you can maybe pull up a photo of that fence, type in. During review of the case, we became aware of this fence just to the west of the property, and it appears to be on the City of Wichita's property. After determining that the fence does not belong to the city, we're putting in a condition, and this is, yeah, she's pulling up the fence, but we're putting in a condition that the applicant either provide a survey showing that the fence is on the property that he owns, or that he relocate that fence to his property. The second new condition we have is that the nightclub in the city shall cease operations by 10 p.m. on Thursday through Sundays and by midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. There's a good picture of that fence, just to the right of the trail there. DAB 1 re-reviewed this case at their meeting on February 7th, and while their first time they heard it, they recommended denial. This time they actually recommended approval. They recommended approval 5-2, but they also removed the condition about the time. They felt that it could be operated as a bar right now with no restrictions on time, and so the recommended restriction for 10 p.m. on weekdays and midnights on the weekends, they did not include that in their recommendation for approval. We have heard from neighbors that have shared their thoughts on this case, and you should have those at your desk or got emailed those comments. Staff is recommending approval of the request subject to the conditions in your staff report, and those include the modified hours, the fence relocation, and the prohibition of outdoor speakers and entertainment. So I think these, we went through these pictures last time. Maybe we could pull up just the site plan showing the overall picture, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Matt?
Matt, I'm glad that on item 2 on your recommendation that those hours have been removed. I was having a little heartburn over that, especially since nightclubs everywhere else in this city don't have those kind of time restrictions on them. So
I would clarify that our recommendation is still that those hours be imposed, but the DAB one recommended approval without those hours. So just to clarify.
And didn't they feel it'd be hard to enforce that rule?
I think that's a good assumption that it's hard to enforce those rules.
Any other questions? Matt, go ahead, Chuck.
Matt, two of the comments we got from the public. Want to know, set an age limit of 35 years and up. Is that legal?
I did talk to our legal staff on that, and I was told that it would be not possible for us to impose that restriction. The property owner could impose that restriction himself, but we cannot impose that on him.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Go ahead, Ms. Cunningham.
Okay. Has the new owner agreed to these conditions of closing at 10 o'clock and midnight?
I did send these conditions to him and talk about the fence with him, but he's online and he could answer those questions in just a moment.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Mr.
I'm good with the recommendation of moving the fence, but the time limits are not workable to me because as a tavern, I can open it as a tavern, it stays open till 2.
Who's talking, please?
So that's
owner.
Dan Davis.
Okay. Could you hang on 1 second? Let's make sure we don't have more questions of staff.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff by the Planning Commission? If not, we can have the applicant speak now. Give us your name and address, please.
Stanley Davis, 2875 Newport Street, Denver, Colorado. And the suggestion of the fence, that's, to me, I've been maintaining the fence, so that makes no difference on which I maintain. If I have to move it, but as far as the time, I think we have to close at 10 and presumably feasible for some looking to rent the building out.
You're in agreement with staff comments, or are you leaning towards what the DAB suggested?
Say that again, you're breaking up.
Sir, if I might suggest, what I believe that I've heard is that Mr. Davis is okay with moving the fence, but is not okay with the time limits, is what I believe that I've heard. Mr. Davis, can you confirm whether I got that correct?
Confirmed.
Thank you. Is there any questions of the applicant by the commission?
No.
Yeah, I have one. As far as security of the facility, of the place. Has he thought any more about that?
Well, I have contacted Wichita and have a security. I need whatever the city me to do, I'll abide by that.
Any other questions of the applicant? Hearing
No,
none.
sir.
Is there anybody else in the commission chamber want to speak on this item? Seeing none, is there anybody virtual want to speak on this item? Anybody virtual want to speak on item 2021-00065? Anybody virtual? Give us your name and address, please.
Sir, I believe that's just some noise that we're getting off of someone who's dialed in. We don't believe that there's anyone else who wants to speak on this.
Hearing none, we'll bring it back to commission. What's the pleasure of the board? Mr. Warren?
I got a question for staff. Can we, one of the, again, from the letters that we got, no outdoor patio service. Is that a part of your recommendation not to allow for any outdoor patio service?
The condition in our staff report recommends no outdoor entertainment, including outdoor speakers. Outdoor service, if it was that's not really included in our condition.
Ms. Foster, did you have something?
No, just was pointing out that the condition was already addressed in item 4.
I thought that's what you wanted, but I want to make sure.
Yep.
Any other questions? What's the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to move that we approve with per staff recommendations with the exception of item 2, the hours.
I would second that. Do you have any recommended hours?
Whatever standard hours are for bar operation, which I believe is...
What would that be, like midnight weekdays, 2 o'clock weekends? Is that pretty standard, or?
I believe it's 2 a.m. every day.
That's over. They already got that.
Just additional information to that point is in consultation with JR, he's indicated that that is set by city code. So if you do not address it with the zoning case, I believe that the city code would apply.
And the city code hours of operation are 2 every day?
We believe it's 2 a.m.
Okay.
I got a motion approved by Ms. Foster, second by Mr. Green. Any discussion?
Can I have a statement? Yes, I would like to say something. You know, I can't support this because this is nothing more than another shooting gallery, because we have a nightclub no more than 200 feet to the east, and there have been numerous homicides there. I don't care what those people say, the owners have tried to do, but that has been a problem that has prevailed in this area, and I cannot see subjecting the local people to what you know is eventually going to happen. When you watch your TV in the future, when you start hearing about homicides happening there, you just remember that.
Any other discussion?
This is a tough one for me because the density of the residential area near there and the size of the homes, people tend to use their outside areas a lot. There are a lot of families with young children and single parent households where though they're not supervised. So there's a greater risk in a part of town like that when you have those situations available. So it's a really tough one for me because it's so close to that residential area. There's a little bit of separation by that. I suppose it's a drainage waterway, but that doesn't really stop traffic, and there is a large history of crime in that area. I think it could be mitigated by security, et cetera, the owner-operator, and though I could support the motion because it meets our zoning requirements, I think it'll be one will require some monitoring down the road for the safety of the neighbors.
Okay, we got a motion. Any other discussion?
Just, I would point out that it's my understanding that this is a bar and is going to continue to be a bar. All we're voting on is whether they have live entertainment or not.
You know, that
You are
adds to
correct,
the-
and that's why I would support it. But let's do a roll call.
Yes, sir. This is on the motion is to approve, subject to the staff recommendation excluding item number 2, which is the hours of the time limits. Bill Johnson?
Yes.
Fox?
No.
Mr. McKay is absent. Green?
Aye.
Dool?
No.
Blick is absent. Nix is absent. Foster?
Aye.
Warren?
No.
Joe Johnson?
Yes.
Miles?
No.
Hartman is absent. Florence?
No.
Cunningham?
No.
Motion fails 4-6.
So now we'll go to item 4.2, conditional use 2022 00001.
Bill
Mr.
Longnecker, Senior Planner, current plans.
Bill, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to get clarification from legal about whether or not we can proceed to the next case. Given that the motion has failed, I just want to get clarification about whether there needs to be a motion to deny or whether we can proceed.
That's a good idea.
My apologies, sir, but just to make sure. So Jeff Van Zandt, if you're available.
Yes, it's so much cleaner if you do a motion to, an alternate motion to deny. So you've got an affirmative action, whether it's approval or disapproval by the commission. There's an assumption it's denied because it wasn't approved, but I much prefer the latter.
Well, I'll make a motion that this be denied.
Second.
Second.
Got a motion to deny by Mr. Florence and second by Ms. Fox. Let's do a roll call then.
Yes, sir. Motion to deny. Bill Johnson?
No.
Fox?
Yes.
McKay is absent. Green?
No.
Dool?
Yes.
Blick is absent. Nix is absent. Foster?
No.
Warren?
Yes.
Joe Johnson?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, sir. Miles?
Aye.
Hartman is absent. Florence?
Aye.
Cunningham?
Aye.
Motion to deny passes 7-3.
Thank you. Hey, Mr. Longnecker, item 4.2.
This is conditional use 2022 for a major utility. Rather than give a full report on this, I'd like to just look at the conditions that the applicant's agent would like to have modified, if that is okay with the chair and the body.
Fine with me.
All right, on condition number 1, the applicant would like a 9-foot tall wall rather than 8 foot. Staff's okay with that. And then on 2, providing a landscape plan to planning that provides 1.5 times the required landscaping review and approval for the site. The applicant would like to have that modified to concentrate that landscaping On the abutting manufactured home parks that are on the east side and the south side of the site. And we're looking at more than a minimum to protect that development there, and the rest of it can be just per landscape code. And staff's okay with that. I'll stand for questions.
Any questions, Bill? Thank you, Bill. Applicant or agent?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commission. Rebecca Melius, agent for the applicant, PEC 303 South Topeka here in Wichita. I would just echo what Bill shared. The Evergy is looking, and I might clarify, for a minimum of 8 foot. As you're aware, with some of our recent cases, our masonry walls average in the 9 to 10 foot range. So as long as that's not an issue, the clarity was just for a minimum of 8 foot. I think it was a supportive of staff. And then on the landscaping, we're wanting to be good partners. We've recently had a lot of additional communications with staff of ways that our substations can meet those minimums, but can also fit the needs of the long-term uses of the substation. So like Bill said, we're just wanting to clarify that requirement rather than a restriction specifically to 1.5 times, that language be modified to an increase in the landscaping that would protect the neighborhood adjacent, but that be something that we can work through with staff so that we don't have to come back to this body for specific clarification. So however that needs to be modified, we just want to offer that back, as we're willing to work with staff to come up with compliance with, again, that emphasis of protecting the manufactured home park. I might note that there will be 2 masonry walls. There's an existing masonry wall on the mobile home park, manufactured home zoning, as well as the proposed masonry wall. So most of our goal with that increased, or that landscaping, will be to just break up the walls for aesthetic. There is really not going to be a whole lot you're going to see. In talking with staff, one of the other goals was sound protection. So we're looking to find the right tree and the right plants that will live well in these conditions, but that can then support those goals. So that's what we're looking for, but I'm open to any other questions.
Any questions, the agent?
So, Rebecca,
yes,
there's going to be 2 walls with plants between?
It sounds silly, doesn't it? So I would love to not do any landscaping, but I know that that's not the right choice, especially for this site. So
the manufactured home side is lower, correct? Lower than 8?
The existing wall, I believe, is a 6 foot wall, but I've not measured it. So it's somewhere between 6 and 8 foot, yes. And will be somewhere between 9 and 10. To Bill's point in the staff report is that there will be, it's a substation. We're gonna have a couple of dead end towers that are 65 to 75 foot tall. But we're not gonna put a tree that's gonna protect that either. So it's one of those, we can't put a tree big enough to protect from the height that we're gonna have, but we can put some in there to potentially help buffer the additional noise concerns, or to break up the wall, things along those lines. So that's where I wanna, as much as possible, leave that as a flexibility with us, a landscape designer and staff, that the intent be that we're protecting the residential neighborhood and giving us some time to work through that, because we have not had that opportunity yet.
Any other questions?
All right, just to clarify that, the wall that is on the east and south, there's currently wall there for the manufactured home
zoning
development.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how far away will your wall?
50 feet.
50 feet between the 2 walls. Okay.
So,
well, that makes a little more sense.
It helps. Yes, I guess that's the thing that the site plan might show a little bit more clearly. It's a little hard on the smaller scale to tell. The substation is set into this site by somewhere between 40 and 60 feet. We do have some easements on the east side that we wouldn't be able to plant into. So that dimension, this dimension here is a 60-foot dimension. I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen there, but we do have some easements there along that east property line. And then we will want to have an offset from this masonry wall so that we don't end up with anybody climbing said trees to get into a substation, because there are silly people out there that decide that's what they want to do with their free time. So our proposal would be, we're in agreement with staff comment that there needs to be additional landscaping, that there needs to be landscaping to be in compliance, but the end goal being to protect the residences as best we can. So,
and then on the north and west lines, the landscaping would just be the standard landscaping requirement?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay.
And there wouldn't, just for clarification, there wouldn't be any for the west because it's a shared zoning. The north would just be the street yard requirement. So we would work through that with staff to make that work.
Any other questions of the agent? Ms. Foster?
Can I clarify that if, to meet what you're asking, we would, on condition 1, say a wall between 8 to 10 foot high, and condition 2 on the landscape plan, just say a minimum of 1.5 times the required landscaping, would that?
So my concern with that is, what if it's 1.25? We're in agreement that landscaping is going to need to be required. My understanding of the code, and I would have to lean on staff, is that the screening with the masonry wall meets all of the screening requirements, but we're wanting to do more than that by adding landscaping. So I don't necessarily want to say it's going to be 1.5 times, because I don't know that that's the appropriate value. I would rather just acknowledge that landscaping needs to be provided, let's say in addition to the wall, to protect and support the existing residential uses adjacent. My goal would be that provision emphasize the intent of what that's asking for. So right now we're saying, okay, we want 1.5 times, but the intent for that is to protect the residences, is what we've discussed with staff. My desire is just that this provision reflect that in lieu of an actual unit.
So
a minimum of the required landscaping? Would that give you enough wiggle room?
With the emphasis of the goal is to protect the residential.
I don't know that we can
and that's
put a goal in a motion.
And that's where I don't know. I would like to leave that up to staff. I mean, staff's telling us what they want. We're saying we think it might be 1.5, it might be 1.25. That's where we're at. I don't know what the right answer is.
We'll choose one then.
Yes, ma'am. And maybe Bill has a better idea.
So could we say provide landscape plan subject to staff approval at the time of final preparation?
And that's where I don't know if we can rephrase that to have the goal of protecting the residential adjacent. I mean, staff knows the goal, I guess.
Scott? If I may, Scott Wadle from the Planning Department. Since we're horse trading, at the podium, one thing that I would suggest too is that we are very sensitive to the residential that's nearby, but also when it comes to landscaping, the visual impact to the arterial roadway, as well as properties to the west, will be important too, because of the flat and open spaces that will make the utility use much more visible. We're very comfortable working at this point for this case, maybe even with the next one, we'll see when we get to it, on the landscaping, since we've not had more in-depth conversations with PEC or their client on what their landscaping needs are, because we know it's somewhat unique because of the nature of the utility, but also while balancing the needs of the community and the standards that have been established before and what the intent was behind those standards.
So if we were to make a motion that to approve with item 1 stating a minimum 8-foot masonry wall, minimum of 8 foot, so that you could go 25 feet, maybe not. Minimum of 8-foot masonry wall. And on number 2, that applicant would provide planning staff a landscaping plan for approval with a minimum of the landscaping ordinance requirement.
Okay, looks like we're okay with that. Yes, sir.
So the minimum is going to be met, and if they want to go beyond that, would be fine.
Yes, and we would certainly be willing to talk with them about that because, as the agent has indicated, some tree species are not going to be appropriate for that. And perhaps, you know, we know there are wildlife concerns as well, so the variety of bushes or whatever type of materials are used, we'll want to have a look at that.
Okay, so well, that's my motion then.
Well, let's make sure ain't nobody wants to talk on this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we'd already had it.
Is there any other questions of the agent? Seeing none. Does anybody virtual want to speak on this item? Anyone virtual? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to commission. What's the pleasure of the board?
Okay, well, my motion, could you read it back for me, please?
I can make an attempt.
No. But the motion is to approve with item 1 being a masonry wall that is a minimum of 8 feet tall, and item 2 for the applicant to provide a landscaping plan to the planning department that meets the minimum requirement for landscaping, and they can provide as much more than that if they want.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Green, second by Ms. Foster. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, the next item, 4.3, additional 2022-00002. Cassie, your last case.
My last case. And it's Rebecca. It's been the Rebecca show today, kind of. Okay, sorry. Okay, so this is another, this is a utility expansion. There is an existing substation there. Evergy is wanting to expand this. Could you go to the next slide, please? So you can see in the southeast corner where the existing substation is. Across the street is City of Wichita. To the northwest is City of Wichita, and to the west is City of Wichita. So if I could make this brief, what staff is recommending is approval of the conditional use for the substation. They are requesting a 9-foot chain link fence, and staff did make a recommendation for some kind of landscaping to help soften that, since that's a major arterial and maybe in the future it would get annexed into the city, but we felt that it was important that we try and make some landscaping requirement there just to buffer that intersection. And so staff recommended that, let's see, where did I put that in there? That they have landscaping materials planted along the property line along West MacArthur Road and Southwest Street of ornamental or evergreen trees that wouldn't exceed 20 feet in height at maturity, and then every 30 feet with 2 shrubs between the trees. So trees at 30 feet, 2 shrubs between along MacArthur and West Street. And I'll answer any questions.
Any questions of staff? Seeing none. Applicant or agent?
Good afternoon. Oh. Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, Rebecca Melius with PEC, agent for the applicant, 303 South Topeka. As Kathy mentioned, this is yet another substation. Evergy at this time has not requested to be annexed. There's not an intent to be annexed. So in agreement with staff, or appreciative of staff's recommendation. We would like to be able to have additional discussions about the landscaping requirement. Right now, the requirement of every 30 feet would have an addition of something along 20 trees at a minimum on each of those frontages. And so that's a little bit concerning, mostly because of the existing infrastructure along MacArthur. There's a transmission line that runs east-west. Similarly, there are West Street from 235 to MacArthur, as well as MacArthur South, are both in the CIP right now for design, for widening of the street and some drainage improvements associated with that. And since those are not finalized yet, we're a little concerned with, I know this will all be on our property, but there's still some discussion of the ditch improvements or even the intersection improvement that might impact how much landscaping. Our concern is if we're committing to that many trees at this ratio right now, it may be detrimental to some of those improvements as well. So we would like to, again, agree to have landscaping be installed as a part of this site, but with a little bit of flexibility to discuss with staff potentially a reduction in this. And I don't know if we need to go to, I don't have a proposal of how much less, because I would like that to be a coordinated effort. So I don't have a specific request, except that every 30 is a little bit too much for what we're looking at, especially with conformance of the adjacent sites. If there were more established and they had something we could match, we agree we want to soften and we want to break up the wall, but that specific standard is a little more than we're comfortable committing to at this time. But I would offer any discussion that I can.
Any questions, Agent? I guess I want to ask staff what they're requesting. Hang on.
Staff would be in agreement with what the applicant is requesting, that the landscaping be determined after the final plans have been drawn for that intersection, and just to work with planning staff.
Thank you, Kathy. Jack?
The proposal that you've given to us in the staff report, how close is that to the city of Wichita? I know this is county, but how close is that to the city of Wichita's requirements?
Well,
pink lines.
Oh, per the city of Wichita ordinance, trees are 1 per 40 feet, and then I don't know if there's anything about shrubs. There's not. It's trees 1 per 40 feet.
I guess the reason I bring that up, this is bordered by the city on 2 sides. Someday it will be 3. It will be in the city. This is the opportunity to put in something that would be consistent with what the city would be. I'm a little bit nervous about getting completely. We'll make it up as we go down the line for somebody to approve. I would want to put a minimum standard of something rather than saying that we'll draw up and have staff approve it. So I guess we need to make a determination today what that minimum standard would be.
I agree. We need a minimum standard. I also think I sympathize with Evergy as far as the flexibility. If you have to put a tree every 30 feet and that happens to be where your overhead lines are coming out.
Just the number.
Yeah, some sort of max or minimum number of trees, but not necessarily be rigid about the spacing. Would that maybe help?
I would offer, Mr. Warren brought up a great point. This is a more dense requirement than even the city standard, 1 per 30 versus 1 per 40. So even if it was a reduction back to something more matching of the city landscape ordinance with the final spacing being determined with staff, I think would be better than the rigid every 30 with shrubs in between.
Well, and I'm glad that the agent that you expressed that, because my thought was after your comment, Chuck, was that we've got city on 2 sides here.
Actually, all 3.
3 sides. Yeah, 3 sides here, and it would make sense to me to have a minimum of what the city code would require for landscaping as a minimum.
And I think that's fair. Again, I think it would just reflect back that the city standard be followed and a final plan be approved by staff would be well received.
Any other questions of the agent? Thank you.
I do.
Oh,
I
go
do.
ahead. Ms. Cunningham?
Yeah, this is gonna be fencing instead of a wall, right?
Yes, ma'am. That's the plan.
And so maybe that's why staff went with more trees, because it's City of Wichita on most of the sides. Could we put language in there that says you do 30 feet with the exceptions of lighting or driveways, whatever the built environment's going to end up? If we just put an exception in there and then we still get in the areas where we need it, a denser type of tree and shrub. Would that work?
I would contend that the city's, if we were to jump back to the city standard, that would probably be where you would end up. But again, I haven't actually laid out a landscape plan for this, so I don't have a firm answer. That's ultimately going to be up to you all. But I think if we followed the city standard, that would end up similar to what you're looking for.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anybody virtual want to speak on this item? Anybody virtual? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to commission. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve with the landscaping requirement being a minimum of city, comparing with city requirements, with the final design to be approved by staff.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Warren, second by Florence. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? That carries. Is there any other written on the public business? Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
This is,
Talking, they're muted. Non-public hearing.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yes, sir. There's one additional item, which is that Kathy Morgan, this is, as many have noted, this is her final MAPC, was her final MAPC meeting or final MAPC presentation, and I believe she may be celebrating behind me, but I wanted to make a note of that, and in fact, we have some items to present to her, and I don't know if you would like to do that as part of the MAPC meeting, or you also have the option of adjourning the meeting, and then I can go ahead and present that, and we can keep the online virtual session going. It's up to you.
Yeah, so you want to keep this as the meeting or have it?
I thought the way it's on the agenda was after the meeting, so I didn't know.
Okay, so if you'd like, sir, if you can, if you all can adjourn the meeting, then we can go ahead and proceed with the celebratory occasion.
I'm with you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion to adjourn. Got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay.